Alright guys, this video is just going to be a quick rundown on some best practices for using the food scale. This is going to be especially useful if you have never used a food scale before. I'm going to run through a few different examples of some different types of foods that have different metrics to give just kind of a basic overview.
Okay, so first off, why use a food scale? Why can't we just use measuring cups? I thought this was a really good example to show you guys for that. So the reason that we want to use a food scale and not just measuring cups is because we are trying to get as precise as possible, and the food scale is how we do that. So this is just an example of if you were to have a little bit under a cup of oats or a little bit over, like a heaping amount of oats, and the difference in the calories between that would be. So this is on the left, 1 serving, and on the right, that's a serving and a half. That's almost 100 calories more. If we were to go 100 calories over with everything that we ate throughout the day, think about how many more calories that you would be consuming. And when we are trying to make small adjustments in your diet, so that way we can say, hey, your maintenance is 2,500. If you eat 2,400, you're in a deficit. If you eat 2,600, you are in a surplus. We can't make adjustments like that if we aren't precise on what we're eating and what we're taking in. So precision is key when it comes to nutrition.
So first example, I am going to go through just making a simple bowl of cereal. So I would suggest to go ahead and add in both the cereal and milk to your MyFitnessPal log, so that way you know how much to pour in based off what you need for the day. If we have already predetermined that we want 2 servings of Cinnamon Life, we come over here and see that a serving is 32 grams, so we're going to be pouring in 64. So once we have our bowl on the scale, we turn it on. Want to make sure it's zeroed out, so if it said something other than 0, like if I added the bowl afterwards, I want to go ahead and hit 0. Once your scale zeroed out, start pouring in. Alright, too much. There we go, 64. Alright, so for the milk, we're going to weigh out liquids in ounces. So we know that if we put 8 ounces into MyFitnessPal, we want to change our food scale to ounces. So first off, I'm just going to go ahead and zero the scale back out. And then I'm going to come over here and wait until my scale is in ounces. So there we go. OZ. Sometimes liquids can be a little more tricky to hit right on. Okay, next example, I want to show you guys a little trick with something like peanut butter. So that we're not sitting here having to zero the scale out and then taking peanut butter from the jar and sliding it on there, and then taking the knife and going back in there and sliding it on there and trying to get to 32 like that. We can simply take our jar of peanut butter and we can go ahead and zero it out. I'm going to change this back to grams. So if we want 1 serving, which is going to be 33 grams, we can just go backwards from 0. So we'll go until the scale says negative 33. So that way it's just a lot easier. Another thing to point out is something like butter or olive oil. So both of these two things have a lot of calories, and if you cook with them, you have to track that. If you are sauteing your vegetables in olive oil, that needs to be tracked. Put your frying pan on the food scale first and then douse it with your olive oil if you're going to do that. Just make sure you know that every gram of olive oil is 9 calories worth of fat. So just be careful with stuff like that. anything like salt or spices, typically that stuff doesn't have any calories, so spice it up. Just, don't go crazy. We don't want anybody with high blood pressure. Another thing that people sometimes get tripped up on is something like syrup. So that comes in milliliters. So a serving is 30 milliliters. We can count milliliters as grams because it is very close. And as long as you consistently count this as milliliters as grams, and you do it the same way every time, it's not going to matter. Next thing I want to hit is something like bananas. So you should weigh out your bananas. Don't just go into MyFitnessPal and add in 1 banana, because not all bananas are created equally. Some bananas can be 150 grams, and then you can have really small bananas that might only be like 80 grams. And when you are trying to be consistent with counting up your carbs for the day, that makes a pretty big difference. So just make sure you actually do weigh out the bananas on the food scale, and then go into MyFitnessPal and make sure you find a banana entry that comes in grams. Okay, one that's a little bit more tricky is things like rice and noodles. So cooked rice and noodles do not weigh the same as uncooked. 50 grams of cooked rice has way less calories than 50 grams of dry rice, because the cooked rice has now absorbed water. So you can weigh it uncooked and then weigh it again after you cook it and divide to get a conversion factor. Or if you want to make your life a little more simple, I would just go into MyFitnessPal and look up an entry for already cooked rice, and then use that same entry every single time. I can send you the one that I use if you guys would like. If that makes your life a little easier, just hit me up for it. You can, of course, do it that way if you are going to weigh it out dry and then eat all of it. But what I do is make bulk amounts of rice, and then I put it in a tub, and every time I weigh it out, I'm weighing out the already cooked version. So looking at this doesn't help me unless I have the conversion factor. Alright, a final thing for this video, stuff like homemade food. So grandma sends you home with some fruitcake. Yum delicious. I'm still going to weigh this out. I am going to find a food entry in MyFitnessPal for like homemade fruitcake or something like that, and I'm just going to roll with it. Stuff like that, you kind of just have to guess, but guessing is better than just saying screw it and not counting it and overeating for the day, or just not counting it all for the whole day. So just do your best with something like this.